Welcome to Public Policy Making. This is a short course that will help you to develop some ideas. Basically, if you have an issue or a problem you may have discovered in your community or about society, you might want to talk about it and find some potential solutions. Or perhaps you even have some ideas on how to fix that problem, but perhaps not what to do in the next step of achieving that. So what we will talk about today is how to get started in making these policies. So first of all, what is public policy making? It is a connection between society and government, and it is a feedback loop between the two. But to put it simply, it is creating an issue or problem and then working to develop a solution to that problem with the governments or people in charge that can use their funds, create legislation or a new law, and to implement the solution to our problems. So that is what it is. Why is it important? It is getting increasingly difficult for governments and societies to come together and meet. Our cities are getting larger. We're getting more and more isolated due to events in the certain last year or so. It is important to try to re-establish some of these connections. For governments to make their policies, they need feedback from its citizens. So if we have some great ideas, whether it be addressing some of the problems we have personally or in society, or whether it's we've thought about it and a way to actually develop solutions, it is important to have that communication to aid our own democracies in finding good solutions. So, can citizens develop policies too and not just government? Yes, they can. But of course, they need to be well thought out. They need to be discussed in depth. And when they are taken to the governments in charge, they will be much more likely to be listened to if we provide strong evidence for those issues that we've created. So how might we do this? We have a policy-making process on VR democracy, which follows these 5 steps. So firstly, there is an issue, so something we have identified as a potential problem. And this could be from a small scale thing in a community, even up to something national or perhaps global. Yet it is not enough that we just have an idea and get it out there. We need to be able to discuss this idea with others. We do this so that we can get ideas from multiple places, we can refine our arguments, and we can sort out what the potential problems are. Once we've had this discussion, then we can start thinking about the solution once we've defined that problem properly. How do we formulate policy? This is where we need very good research. We need to look at other evidence that we have at our, that is available to us. So whether that is from research articles or from sources that we can trust. Next, we tend to debate that policy. So which policy may be the best to go forward? There may be differing ideas, and things like cost and expenditure may come into it as well. Finally, we decide, or we vote on, which policy is going to be the one that we think is best, that we can take to the next level and to actually do something with it. Far too many times, people use the internet as a conduit for frustration, emotion. They may have some ideas, but they are not developed enough and they don't know where to go for the next step. So once all this process has been followed, we have the opportunity to move on to a next step of actual action much more easily. And this is what VR democracy does. So the next thing I want to talk about is an example. So a case study I have is something on cybersecurity. So we're going to follow this step-by-step process together, and we're going to see how we're going to actually form a policy based on an issue. So how do we do that? This is the VR Democracy website, and I have an example issue here, just to give you an idea. This is the process. We have the issues, discussions, create policies, debate them in our own VR environment, and then have a final vote about them. So our cybersecurity issue is here. It's already prepared. So let's click on it. Now this is the section where we're going to define the problem and give our evidence for it. So we're not just going to be able to vent or complain about something we don't like. We need to be able to identify it and define it properly. Of course, we may not like it, but we need to provide our reasons and our evidence why that things must be changed. So we have an example here of cybersecurity. You may pause the video if you want to read this more in depth, but I will just summarize it briefly. And that is basically with cybersecurity issues, people are vulnerable to identity theft, ransomware, software, and other sort of difficult things online that could cause financial loss. So even though there are some things in place to try to stop this. And in fact, this issue here does talk about some references that the government have tried to address it with businesses. Is it enough though? Many people are still getting caught by these scams. And this important part here, we can see it's cost Australian businesses as high as $29 billion annually. So even with these mechanisms in place the government has with website information, perhaps there may be more we can do. So the issue kind of goes on and gives more evidence, but really the question is the cybersecurity risk for businesses and households. So yes, there's a big focus on business, but even personal people can get scammed very easily because hackers and phishers are becoming more and more sophisticated with their methods, and we need to be able to combat this. So this is the issue that's being posted, and what do? We put it in our community. And so, for example, someone has commented here and said they agree, but what can be done? And this is why we need to now, after various discussion, move on to forming policy. So we can see on the site, you can comment below the issue. There is also a space here, or even a live chat feature to chat in real time about these issues. But once we've had our discussions, we move to the policy. So if we go to our policies here, and we'd like to make a new policy, we can select an issue that is hot right now. And here we have our cybersecurity issue. Now, instead of writing one out, of course, just like any good cooking show, I've prepared one earlier, and I can paste it into this field and briefly go over what this will talk about. So this is my title. So my proposed solution to the issue of economic loss. So yes, we know it's occurring. We've had that figure of $29 billion. What do we do apart from direct people to websites where governments have posted information? What else can we do? So I have briefly summarized a couple of things here. And I've said, I believe that the issue is important, it should be addressed, and it should also aim to empower people to be able to overcome this themselves, and especially to be able to protect their own assets. Is a very serious thing to be able to have this at risk. Any sort of physical assets are protected by security systems, just like online assets must also be the case. So how should we proceed? I have a couple of examples of suggestions. One is an advertising campaign. So we can have more expenditure on promoting advertising around cybersecurity, so people have increased awareness. directed to websites about information, so it's in their sphere of information. And secondly, could possibly be a cyber safety course. Now, this can be perhaps subsidized or funded by governments, workshops to help defend individuals that may not have experienced this in the business environment. Now, of course, this costs money. So how do I frame this instead of saying, well, yeah, we should just do all this, but I need to look at perhaps the pros and the cons. So while this would be a nice, simplistic response, a very simple policy that responds to the issue, I can actually have options to use additional evidence. So my last line here, I have the estimated net benefit over 6 years is forecast to be $3.3 billion. Well, where did I get that figure? And so this is where, to back this up, I can perhaps quote papers to give evidence if people have already researched this, or we can perhaps provide our own analysis using a couple of tools. So for example, I have, just a short pros and cons list here to protect yourself online. So this is a campaign. Obviously, the cons would be the expenditure, but we can talk about the cost versus the benefit when we analyze each of these things. So for short term, we have awareness and prevention of loss and better technical skills. But one of the long-term things is empowerment of citizens and learning their technology better. So I could have this short little table, or I could even go further and perhaps do an in-depth cost-benefit analysis. Now, this is not required to do when you're forming policy because they are still up for discussion. Someone else may have better information than you, but just for the sake of an example, this is a cost-benefit analysis, very simple one. And all we've got here is, okay, the costs would be doing advertising campaigns and training courses. The benefits would be prevention of financial loss from consumers and businesses, not to mention the time saved by people trying to recover their financial assets or recover their identities that have been thieved. So one such example might be to project these figures for a few years, and then we arrive at some final figure with a fairly significant saving. So even with this sort of minimal expenditure, we've made a significant dent in that $29 billion figure. And we can sort of use these figures using our cost-benefit analysis to back this up. So that would be the formation of our policy. Next, we have the debate. So one of the great things that VR Democracy does, we organize events. So once we have enough people that are interested in debating policy, we invite them to the event to present to everyone on stage in a formal kind of discussion. So it's not really necessarily a combative thing, but we are using this debate format to really kind of nut out those arguments exactly the way we want them, to sort of refine them perfectly so we can get the best possible policies. Now, there may be multiple policies. We've already perhaps agreed the issue is important, but now what is our solution? There may be multiple solutions. Can we do all of them or just one of them? This might depend on our cost-benefit analysis, and these are the things that are going to be debated in a very fun and exciting way. So this is the essence of the policy debate. Finally, once we've had that debate, we have a final vote and that policy is decided. Once it's decided, we can have the next course of action. And this may be the exciting thing of actually approaching community groups, our local representatives in local government or even higher in Congress and so on, to actually say, look at all this evidence that we have provided. We have refined the issue and refined our policies. This is what our community thinks, and these are the solutions here for you. This is great for promoting democracy and for bringing back that connection between our citizens and our government. So that is public policy making. Thank you, and I will see you next time.